Yes, seriously. I'm not joking. This April Fool's Day video somehow managed to become something entirely different. Now, an avid watcher of my channel could have definitely been able to piece together the hints I've been stringing in my recent videos that built up that I would take a full-blown look at this movie. Or Lautner, best known for his role as Sharkboy from Sharkboy and Lavagirl. Yes, that was him. This dream. And no, I don't mean like Cartoon Network airing like Sharkboy and Lavagirl or something. But really, this one absolute mess of a story full of immaturity, weird as hell visuals that literally came from the mind of a child. You're gonna cover this? Now, many people have covered it, bashed it, berated it, tore it apart for how much of an incomprehensible cluster it really is. But I really don't want to do that. Not only is it really not what my channel is about, I don't like to make negative videos like that, I'd rather look at this movie in a different perspective. One that takes a look not at what the movie objectively is, but how everything fundamentally ties to a massive thematic allegory on growing up. I haven't seen this movie in years before now, like not since I was 7 or 8. Now originally, I planned for this video to be a somber retrospective. I was going to look at this movie in the perspective of a person who watched it and liked it as a kid, but grew up and can no longer look at the world with childish eyes. And I still want to, at least for a bit, because it is relevant, just bear with me in the start. But as I watched, I was like, wait, the movie actually does bring up these ideas. Until it hit me that like the entire movie is a huge character exploration of the main character's psyche and emotional balance as he interprets the problems in his life through his subconscious as he tries to escape them in his imagined world, just to show that escapism in that fashion is impossible and ultimately self-destructive, and he needs to actually grow up and be the change he wants to be in his life. And literally, everything about this movie, everything fits this allegory. Yes, seriously, from this movie.
He ruined my dream journal! Sure, Electric, send him to the principal's office and have him expelled!
But again, I'm not kidding, this entire video's intention was turned on its head, and I'm going to actually prove that this movie has genuine narrative and thematic depth that no one has really considered before. I don't want to take an objective look at this as a movie, but instead more of a reflection of a universal experience, childhood. And it genuinely got me to think about the themes and ideas it presents, no matter how weird and unorthodox they are. And please follow with me, I promise you everything will make sense. This movie's existence is already an anomaly, coming from acclaimed director Robert Rodriguez, potentially best known for co-directing Sin City and creating the Spy Kids franchise, which genuinely shows here. But as I said, this movie to me represents childhood, but it literally does, as most of its concepts and story came from Rodriguez's children, mostly Racer Rodriguez, or known as Racer Max. Even more evidentially paralleling it that the main character who made this world is called Max. The movie already represents in the most realistic way the imagination and wonder of childhood. It wasn't conceived and written by adults to appeal to kids. It was made by kids to appeal to kids. Well, to a certain extent. Which really isn't seen much at all, and is arguably one of the best things to capture that facet. And yeah, though it wasn't successful at the box office, many kids did see it, especially when it re-aired a lot on TV. And that included me, and I did like it and I related to it. Sure, adults tore it apart, but kids were intrigued and it keeps a cult following to this day. But that's what makes it interesting. Of course, people love to criticize these types of kids movies for not appealing to objective adult narrative structure and quality, but those movies were made by adults to appeal to kids. But this was basically made by kids to appeal to kids. It almost feels on every level we aren't supposed to see it and judge it in that way. Our eyes are not the target. I'm not saying that as a good thing. I'm just saying this movie stands out this way and continues to drive how I look back on it. Cause I was one of those kids. I saw it when I was younger, and even though I already knew it was weird and kind of bad on an objective level, there was something about it that appealed to me. Its characters, its worlds, and other aspects I found enjoyable, and dare say relatable in many ways, then I liked it. But I'm an adult now. I've grown up. These eyes are grown up. They've seen so many things and I'm different. I can't look at this movie the same way I used to because of it. I've matured. I've experienced more grown-up media with narrative structure and nuance. Complexity that like my 7-year-old brain couldn't comprehend. I expect this now. I expect real genuine depth from my media. Relatability, cohesion, pathos, just everything. I look at what I once loved with old jaded eyes and I can't feel what I once did. Just as the bitter adult looks at a rambunctious kid with ire and annoyance, they need to acknowledge that they were once that kid Do they have the right to shame or be ashamed? But it's not just that this movie was something I enjoyed as a kid and grew out of it, everyone has something like that. It's more so because of how the movie itself represents childhood and a lot of its narratives, themes, and ideas it presents. If you remember from my DreamWorks Dance Party video, I brought up that unlike other movies like Boss Baby or Trolls that more so pander to childhood, trying to amuse them by things that kids would like, Captain Underpants exemplifies childhood by instead showing what is relatable about childhood itself. And honestly, this movie has similar themes in what they bring up. While kids' movies get a bad rap for not being as nuanced and mature as adult media, I do think if a movie made for children did bring up a theme, an idea, some aspect of the narrative that truly made them think and reflect on it, then it has intrinsic worth. And there's so many you can find, like some of the ones from DreamWorks I've already talked about. Love, friendship, acceptance, redemption, confidence, maturity. And honestly, I think this movie is no different in that regard, and later on, it just genuinely does bring it to the forefront. As I said, I find it a strange example of childhood itself. Childhood, imagination, and most importantly, dreams. It literally opens up with the origin story of the characters by Max himself, who makes them from the dreams he has. It's an over-the-top, insane origin story that only a kid would make. A kid who lost his dad and seeks him out while being raised by sharks he studied, becoming a weird, unorthodox superhero. It's dumb, it's stupid, but it's literally what a kid would do and think it's cool. Back then, we used to love making these wild, crazy characters based on what we love and what we think is cool. It didn't matter if it made any sense. It was just fun, enjoyable. We were making our own worlds and ones we loved to develop. It was cooler than the world we were in, that's for sure. And hell, even to this day, people, artists, content creators do the same. We still love to make characters of what we think is cool, designing them, making new stories from them, and hell, you can argue every fictional character is like that. But that original spirit is gone. We still feel the echoes, of course, but we don't have that limitless imagination, the disregard of the norm or wonder we had as kids. Would you make a character like Sharkboy exactly how you would as a kid? No, of course not, unless it was an ironic joke. But I do feel remnants from the time when it was really that simple. The joy of creation just because something was cool and nothing more. And it pains me. And he's not really doing this as some joke that it's a dumb idea. Max genuinely likes his characters and the stories he has. Max is almost seen as neurodivergent, as we see he straight up treats his stories like they're real to the class he's presenting's ire. Like he's just straight up saying to everyone that he hung out with superheroes, and as we later see, it's just a way to cope with him not being able to make any friends at his age. It actually reminds me a lot of a similar situation in Chalk Zone, where Rudy tells the class his own fantastical stories he insists are true, especially even with a girl actually interested in the story he makes. This is Marissa and she's important for later. But unlike Max, Rudy's is real and he can bring his own creations to life through Chalk Zone. The stories also parallel each other a lot in themes of childhood, creation, imagination, and ultimately giving it up. But also, in a way, they're themes of escapism. Rudy literally escapes problems in his life by going to his world of imagination, where his art can come to life and be respected as the creator he is, instead of in real life where his efforts and skill are rarely ever appreciated by those who just see it as a waste of time. But we can see a lot of that escapism too, through the glimpses we see of Max's life. Particularly, and rather kind of harshly, his parents are separating as a divorce is looming, which is honestly pretty heavy for a movie like this to tackle. It's clear that Max is aware of this and seemingly incorporated it into a part of his own subconscious creation, just wishing somehow his parents could be happy together. It's a very heavy topic, and something like imagination and creation is sometimes the key to escapism of a situation, especially when you're a child. In a time when you can't do anything to affect your reality, you're completely powerless, the only thing you have is to make a better situation in your head where it can be what you want. It's really the only way you can hope things can get better. Or maybe not. But it's not even the only way, as we see Max has to deal with his own set of bullies, who harass him for his over-imagination and just overall weirdness. Resonating very well for me as a kid that age who didn't know they had autism. Not fun to bring back. Mostly in the infamous Linus. And also just his very overbearing teacher, Mr. Electrodad, putting him down and telling him that he's too old for fantasy and he needs to grow up and look at the real world. He can't just pretend his fantasies are real and can replace his real one.
Dreaming keeps you from seeing what's right here in front of you.
And later on, we see, almost in a way of internalizing them, They get represented in their dream world as a supervillain trying to take their own world and destroy it. A physical representation of their emotional impact on his own creativity being suppressed. Now, it may seem absurd to make a version of your teacher some over-the-top supervillain even subconsciously, but to be fair, a few college professors that would do the same thing too. There is the overt symbolism of Max's imagined world, the dream world, reflecting his own imagination, and how it's constantly shaped by his desires, and those that seek to repress it in the real world. And again, I'll get more to it later. It's an over-the-top, whack-ass way to represent this issue, but I feel it's an issue that so many of us have faced as kids. You want to stay in a fantasy world where things are perfect, but society and even people you know pressure you to grow up and give it all up. It's not like it's a horrible thing, it's necessary at some point in your life, but it's still a painful thing to go through, because that sense of wonder and youth is part of you. Hell, by then it was you. Ultimately, childhood is a token you need to exchange for responsibility, finally be able to take control of your own life. And again, it's a good thing, you need it to be a functional person, but you still lost something to get to that point. Something you loved and was wonderful. It's what makes nostalgia so alluring. It's a love of something you once had, once felt, and you lost it. You can only remember the good it gave you. It's a honey trap that leaves you stuck in the past, but it's an alluring one nonetheless. Honestly, looking back, even if it might not have been the intention, Max comes across as a very autistic-coded character. He doesn't have any friends, he's constantly off in his own world, and cares much more about it and practically hyperfixate on it, treating it like it's real, and gets very sensitive about it. It's actually something I feel makes the story more relevant nowadays, that this type of neurodivergence is more known and accepted. Like, maybe give it a rewatch and see if you are, wait, that's kind of like how I was at that age. This movie becomes so much more interesting when you don't look at it from an objective narrative viewpoint, but instead see it as a character study of Max, a kid retreating to his own imagination to guard from and represent the struggles he's powerless to face in his life in literally every aspect. It's not a movie, but a psychological evaluation. Max's form of escapism is constantly criticized by his parents, teachers, and even his bullies, basically telling him that he needs to grow up and move past it.
Kids need their dreams.
Kids need to grow up.
But he doesn't want to. He wants to believe in his dream world and escape the pain and struggles of his real one. Culminating when after his precious dream journal gets stolen by Linus, he's terrified of school the next day and wishes something would happen to stop it, and wishes he could escape to the fantastical world in his head. Which makes it fascinating when the movie does merge the two realities in its narrative, where it's hard to tell if this is still imagined or if it's now real. An escapist fantasy now turned reality. He doesn't have to deal with his problems as his OC suddenly come to life and need his help as the creator of their world, a safe planet Drool. But again, what makes it more interesting from this viewpoint is that this is still all the perspective of Max's life, his fears, and his dreams. Now, this movie uses dreams a lot in many ways, to many to an annoying extent, in a literal sense, but also mostly in dreams representing desire, and they correlate through the narrative. Max's dreams are literally his dreams. He wants cool friends. He wants to escape his troubles so he can have fun and ignore his problems. He wants his family to get together more. But also when dreams are crushed, being told that he needs to face the reality of his situation. His teacher telling him he needs to stop dreaming and focus on the real world. How his dad once accidentally ruined his dream of making this robot, Tobor. And his mom that he can't dream of escapism.
Push that dream aside and move on.
There's the core conflict of the innate human want by realistic cynicism that perfectly encompasses the mindset of a child to an adult. Children are full of wonder and imagination. They don't know how the world works and treat it like their imaginations are real because, well, they don't know otherwise. They see an optimistic world of possibility because they don't know any better, and they love it. But adults didn't. They've grown past that naivety. They grew up. They faced responsibility and the crushing reality of day-to-day life and grew bitter and jaded over the years. That optimism and wonder they know is just a delusion by someone who doesn't know any better. You can argue that joy and wonder was never real but shielded by those parents who actually faced the challenges of life when you didn't. But eventually, the facade has to fall. But is it right to do that to a kid? To take away that wonder and joy of life and replace it with the misery of existence? Childhood is sacred because you can only experience it once. The one time you are free from responsibility, the horrible reality of life as you're learning how to deal with it. It's practical, but is it right? Is delusion valid when the alternative is bitterness and misery? All children need to go through this at some point. but shouldn't an adult genuinely try to crush a young optimist's hope for a better world? Replace wonder with unfulfillment and emptiness? It's real, sure, but shouldn't you want something better? A child, of course, doesn't want to let it go, and they want to believe in a better world, hence such a reliance on imagination and escapism. And that is seen clearly through Planet Drool. Planet Drool represents childhood escapism at its core. A supposed childhood fantasy of a far-off place free from real-world problems, just playing games and having fun. A world so cool, you drool. It's everything Max wants and wants to go to instead of his life. And honestly, the terrible CG does kind of add to the dreamlike events of this movie. Like, it does feel like literally being plopped in an incomprehensible dream. The uncanny valley actually helps the illusion. This is literally a world of his imagination and desires, and his imagination trying his best to keep him there. But he can't exactly be the dreamer it wants him to be. Max is the conscious mind, while Drool is the subconscious. He has both imagination and realism, and it doesn't allow him to adapt entirely to the world of his creation, just as the rational part of you aware when you dream, the one that calls out that reality isn't real. One of the bigger quotes, Lavagirl says that everything that is and ever was began with a dream. It's interesting when you judge that coming from an entity of pure imagination, because they would know nothing else but that. In their perspective, it is literally true, but it's also interesting looking at it from the perspective of dreams as desire, because in a way, it is right. Pretty much most of the world you see was made out of multiple entities' individual desires to make what they want, and real life is just a massive web of desires and executions. Desire is ultimately the foundation of humanity in a way. And this especially resulting in a world of pure desire and people of pure desire. But it also brings a lot of ideas as a person who does this type of thing. I've made plenty of characters in my head and those I've shared online, from just ideas, designs to fully developed world and narratives. It always begs the question, how real are they in your mind? They represent so much of you in your storytelling and designing desires that you internally put so much into them. Their thoughts and lives are your life, and you think, what if they were real, and how would they think of you making them? And this movie does directly tackle that in a weird way. Sharkboy and Lavagirl hold so much relevance for Max as their creator and creating the world they live in. He is their god and their true purpose in existing, and everything he has made.
And you jumped us, Max. Us in this whole place.
You think, therefore I am. It's just something that feels so metaphysical in a way I can't explain, but I just feel, and hope some of you can as well. Another interesting thing is that Lavagirl is not a completed character. In universe, she doesn't know her own origin or even her role, and Max doesn't know either. Sharkboy has his lore and motivation in the beginning, but Max didn't develop her as much, and it's her main internal conflict. Basically, she's just a cool design with cool powers who works with his other OC, but she doesn't know about herself because Max didn't write her to be, and desperately wants it. In fact, she even wonders if she's evil as a being of innate destruction and prone to outbursts, and literally just burning by contact. That's actually a really fascinating idea I haven't seen before. An OC that wasn't given the development of the others in their universe, acknowledging it, and wishing they could know more about themselves, talking to their creator, who has to admit even they don't know how they would develop it.
If you happen to dream about who I am and how I fit into this world, that would really be helpful.
I haven't seen anything like that before, and it's a really interesting idea. You know, this whole internal conflict really reminds you of Flame Princess from Adventure Time, but hey, at least you can argue here her being underdeveloped was intentional. But to the core of the conflict, an overlying theme of the movie, that Planet Drool is dying, and they need Max to save it as the creator. His dreams are being destroyed, and even they won't be spared if it does collapse. His imagination and escapism is being threatened, and it wants him to save it physically, represented in this conflict. And it's none other than by Mr. Electric. Now, this guy has been memed to death constantly, and for good reason. I mean, it's goddamn George Lopez and his stupid robot body mugging at the camera constantly.
Hey, what's up?
But look at it thematically. His teacher bluntly told him that he needs to grow up and stop dreaming, as his imagination represented that physically through a villain that is seeking its destruction. Like, of course he's a big, doofy, idiotic Saturday morning cartoon villain who constantly makes bad puns. He is literally how the subconscious of a child internalizes the threat of an authority figure. Even more subtext, as Mr. Electric was supposed to help keep it running, but decides to destroy it, just as his teacher was supposed to help Max, but end up hurting him.
Why are you bringing misery to our planet? You're supposed to be running it.
They're supposed to be running it.
Now, Mr. Electrodad had his best intentions in mind. He was just trying to help Max, but to his childish imagination, that's a threat to his being and his desires of escapism. Growing up means growing out of it, abandoning it, and it will inevitably kill this world, and Max doesn't want it to. Again, it's his biggest desire to escape his reality, to retreat to his perfect fantasy world. It also arguably represents how sensitive kids' mindsets are, like what was said earlier. His teacher tried to help him saying that, but Max interpreted it as a threat to his way of life, and his mind villainized him because of it. Mr. Electrodad didn't think much of it, but he took it so badly because, like before, when your world is optimistic, nothing is more crushing than brutal cynicism.
Dreaming keeps you from seeing what's right here in front of you. Where all the useless dreams go. To the dream graveyard.
But even if he wants to, he can't control this world. As I said, it's his subconscious desires, and he's still not entirely on board with it, still dealing with his reality. And also more subtext about his initiative I'll get to later. He wants to escape to this world, not control it. Ironically, he's just as powerless in his dream world as the real world, as his imagined antagonist representing his insecurities takes advantage of it and attacks with those things that remind me a lot of those enemies in the second chapter of Deltarune. As his imagined OCs are basically the only way he can fight back in his dream reality. In a way, they are his desires in imagination taking his best interest, his vessels in a world of subconscious. Honestly, I should probably get more into the titular characters, because they are actually very thematically interesting. Now, as I said, everything in his imagination is represented in Max's psychosis. There's the stuff on the surface, how the two represent his desire for real friends, as he wants to make really cool characters with cool superpowers, and they in turn are his creations in the universe, and acknowledge him as their creator, and want to help him and save the imagined world he made. And even then, as I said, there's some interesting ideas there. But there's arguably deeper facets than that. I looked through TV tropes and actually had virtually the exact same thought I did, how the entire movie is a character study in Max's head, about his imagination, and how his real world problems and insecurities affect it, and how he ultimately overcomes it. And in the same psychological viewpoints, Sharkboy and Lavagirl both represent Max's id and superego. I swear this makes sense. Sharkboy's power comes from his super strength and predator abilities, namely in claws, strength, and his powerful shark jaw. Because of it though, he is characterized as very headstrong and aggressive. The id in psychology represents a person's primitive impulsive instincts to get what they want, which correlates exactly to Sharkboy. He's Max's aggressive impulses manifested, the inner rage and drives he forces himself to keep buried in his practical life. Hell, we can see it in his real introduction, immediately pissed at Linus, his bully, and tearing up his paper. He's the anger and fury of a child forced to suppress his emotions to get the life he wants. Even when he tries to be nicer and sympathetic in the infamous Dream song, he really can't and goes back to looking through things through force and violence, because ultimately, that's the part of the mind he represents. Hell, he'll even take it out on his creator half the time, berating him for not being able to save the imagined world and not making him a stronger character. He's the one angriest about these threats to the imagined world and to Max's head and wants to beat them. But on the other side, Lavagirl is Max's superego. Lavagirl is basically a molten biology, primarily able to generate molten lava and fire from her body to attack, super strength, as well as just other ambiguous magma powers such as that one really weird thing. I should draw hot struts doing that.
We believe in you, Max.
But she's actually the rational one of the group, more mostly intelligent, compassionate, and logical. She's more of an idealistic dreamer, and is always the one to explain things to Max. She finds Max the answer to all their problems, and hopes that he can finally help her find closure in her life. The superego in psychology represents a person's moral compass. They represent the rules and morality learned by a person, which is seen a lot through her. She is the one who explains the rules of this world and has the emotional drive of the situation, trying to appeal more to Max's sympathy and feelings, being his moral compass and sympathetic shoulder, and takes the emotional perspective most of the time, the fiery passion of human emotions. While Sharkboy tends to berate Max for his failures, Lavagirl is the one who sticks up for them and empathizes with their struggle.
Really thought you were the answer, Max. Don't listen to him.
Now, despite her powers, Lavagirl kind of infamously fails a lot in her mission, mostly due to her own biology, almost making her full useless, and if anything counterproductive, destroying everything she touches, which is relevant to her character arc. But you can argue that's the point in psychology. As the part of the mind representing emotion and social values, she reflects Max's struggles unable to fix the situation he's in by society and reality. The uses emotions that only make things worse, and can't understand it as she can't understand herself. Lavagirl's own self-loathing of her existence reflects Max's self-loathing he experiences in his own life. It even goes further as Sharkboy has a physical character motivation in finding his lost father, while Lavagirl has an emotional character motivation to find her origin and purpose. Ultimately, the two balance each other out to make the full ego, Max, and why they are a team. There is legitimately more in this movie than I thought, wow. Also, I know people joke how the Twilight hottie Taylor Lautner was in this movie of all things, but also Lavagirl is played by a girl named Taylor Dooley. There were 2 Taylors in this movie as the main leads. That must have been confusing on set. But back on topic, the movie does have another interesting concept, where they get trapped in a pit of lost dreams. Seemingly like a thought graveyard, where Max's old ambitions and desires lay dying and decayed as they're forgotten and abandoned. But it gets interesting when they find Tobor himself. As I said, Tobor was a robot Max thought he could create until his dad accidentally told him it wouldn't work, as Max being a kid internalized it and had his dreams crushed. And that destroyed desire manifested in his dreamscape as Tobor is alive in his mind and yet dysfunctional and dying in something that looks straight out of Epic Mickey. But think about it. Genuinely think about it. Where are you now? And what did you think you would be as a kid? You've had plenty of dreams when you were younger, what you wanted to be when you grew up, outrageous ideas and concepts when the world felt like it was your oyster. But rarely, if any of them became true. Reality hit you like a truck and those dreams got destroyed, just buried and forgotten as you're forced to move on with your life. I'm sure so many of you feel regret in wishing your life really could have been what you thought it could have. But reality and dreams don't always mix. And here we see a representation of that regret and failure manifested in a living being, dying and decayed because you couldn't have the willpower or chance to actually make them real. It's almost existential, but as a being that Max imagined him, an intelligent robot who's supposed to help him, he's able to give sage advice, telling him where he needs to go to manifest his true potential, and sacrifices what's left of his body to take them to a train of thought. Wow, I can't believe Inside Out ripped off this movie. But as he does, Tobor makes a clear distinction between him and Sharkboy and Lavagirl, that they are powerful dreams that manage to exist in their own right, while he just stays a dream. Interesting again to dive into the level of cognitive awareness as the two are his developed characters he put his heart and soul into making and wishes they were real to fill in the void of not having friends. But Tobor wasn't given that dedication to him, just making him ultimately a dream that was never meant to be.
Everyone kept telling me he would never work. So here he is.
He's not upset or envious, he just accepts what he ended up being. Even Max apologizes for forgetting about him, and ultimately making him nothing more than a failed idea, now seeing the manifestation of a lost dream in his own mind. Can you imagine looking your failure in the face and telling it, "I'm sorry"? Tobor, though, is happy now, and free from just being a forgotten dream, holding no animosity.
You kidding? You just saved me. I'm free.
And yeah, this scene is memed, but again, think about it symbolically. Tobor ultimately was an idea that Max had as a personal robot helper, but he was told he couldn't make it, and that insecurity made him give up on it, turning them to just a discarded hunk in his mind to be forgotten and buried. But still, because of the situation, Max's existential crisis, he finally was able to have a purpose, even if it wasn't the intention. He assisted his creator in a time of need. He's not free because he can just now float around forever, but he's no longer just a forgotten idea. He served a new purpose, even if it wasn't the intent of his creation, and after so long, he is loved and remembered. When you look at it symbolically, it becomes more poignant and thought-provoking. If your failures were manifested in your mind, just as I said before, if your life still ended up alright, would they be happy with their role that they still led you in a good direction, even if it wasn't their purpose? It's just something to think about. It eventually goes to the land of milk and cookies, which again plays into Drool's idea of childhood escapism being a perfect paradise, even more since it's called out as the perfect safe place for Max to dream, because it helps him fall asleep to escape to his fantasy world. Everything seems random, but again, everything has a meaning. But it gets more interesting when his parents are manifested too as giant inhabitants, actually calling back to a previous cookie scene. But fittingly, in an area represented as childhood fulfillment and optimism, Max imagined them as happy together, and wishes that his real parents could have been like that. leading to another notable line.
Most dreams don't come true on their own. You have to make them true. Not easy, but not impossible either.
And yeah, for as much as this movie makes a big deal about dreaming, this is important to the overall thematic point of the narrative. Desires are great and important, and so is ideally wishing for a world like it, but without actual willpower and determination to achieve it, it's just gonna stay in the imagination. We've already seen that with Tobor. He was a dream once that was shattered by real-world cynicism, and was just fated to be a discarded memory forever, because there was no result to actually make that dream a reality. Max is pretty much being told that he can't just use his escapism to imagine a better world. He has to actually make the change himself. Even more ironic that it's coming from a manifestation of the escapist fantasy, as even it can't lie to itself. I like how it's actually optimistic, despite it again basically disproving the idealist fantasy, which is the point of the story. Arguably, this whole willpower and dream dynamic can be seen from the conflict of Max, who wants to be the dreamer they need to save the world of imagination, but he's powerless. It's explained that Max manifests his ideas and world through his subconscious while he sleeps. He keeps a dream journal to remember it and harness it, focus the dreams to more coherent ideas, the physical manifestation of his escapist fantasies. But inside of it, without the journal, he can't control his subconscious when asleep, and can't manifest imagination willpower while awake, basically putting him in a catch-22. It's actually an interesting idea when you think of it that way. The conscious battle between subconscious desire and conscious willpower. Also, side note, but I actually do dig the design of Mr. Electric's plug-based minions. Please tell I'm not the only one. In the movie, Max is only able to conjure in his reality when he's asleep or by sheer concentration, again with the notion of it being a manifestation of his subconscious, as Lavagirl brings up that he might be able to daydream, the art of dreaming while awake, and can completely master the imagined world, ironic in a representation of a literal stream of consciousness. Also, I'd love to interpret it as just having the willpower to change the world to a way you want, as Lavagirl, as a being who only knows imagination, can only see creation as an act of dreaming. And daydreaming is dreaming when you're awake, but in reality, it's just literally having the willpower to harness conscious desire. But it does bring an actual deviation to the escapist fantasy of the world. Before, nearly every location is either representative of a real aspect of the human psyche, or an aspect of childhood escapism and desire, except for the Kingdom of Ice. But this could correlate to another aspect of Max's psyche. Marissa is a girl from his class, and seemingly one that Max has feelings for, and she in return, actually really interested in the world he makes, and tries to do something of her own. Though she is seemingly sheltered and overprotected by Mr. Electrodad, who's their father and teacher. Now, Max is a kid and clearly before puberty, but it is very possible that his subconscious takes his desires of her and forms her own place in the world, taking the aesthetics of an ice princess and her powerful heart-shaped gem. Another interesting note is that Sharkboy is also into her, but Lavagirl is spiteful and cautious over it. There are numerous reasons, namely, boy and girl, and Lavagirl even admits the fundamental elements are opposite. But if you remember from before, Sharkboy and Lavagirl represent the id and superego. Sharkboy as the id represents base carnal desire of love and intimacy that a young boy might be feeling and isn't able to grasp. As Lavagirl as the superego is the rational reserved part of the mind that doesn't understand those feelings and doesn't want to disrupt the status quo. Even she can't explain her animosity to them, but it makes sense with the psychological factor they represent. The feelings of a young boy who doesn't understand the way he feels, just that they don't like it despite their base urges. They need the heart to get the power to stop the darkness in their mind, as the heart represents Max's feelings for Marissa. How they literally make the exchange like a marriage proposal.
In sickness and in health, till death do you part.
I do.
It's even said that it's delicate and its destruction would destroy the kingdom, of course being that if his young love falls, then the entire manifestation in his mind does too. Internally, Max is growing up and his mind manifests that in its own way, as the components of his consciousness are in disagreement over it, though they're captured and face the true villain behind all this destruction. Linus, his bully, but not really. In the subconscious, Max manifested Linus as an over-the-top supervillain, Minus. He has changed the dream world to his liking, representing when he stole and ruined Max's dream journal, seeking the world's domination and making new vulnerabilities for the characters. Minus even just straight up calls out the escapism of the world the journals represent, and I was not gonna let him hide in it.
You could escape fear by running away to dreamland. But fear exists in your mind.
Again, in the idea of Drool representing Max's imagination escapism, the biggest threats to it in his reality, wanting him to move past it, are represented as actual supervillains trying to destroy it in his young subconscious mind. In his mind, Linus is nothing more than a villain who wants to destroy his passion and escapism for no real reason and refuses to see any nuance in the situation. And in the dream world, that self-doubt and loathing is actually killing the world and weakening the characters. Literally, his intrusive thoughts. It's interesting to see it again in a thematic symbolic way, to a kid experiencing questioning growing up and giving up on his fantasy desires and imagination. But they do manage to get the book back, as Max has his conscious link to his subconscious mind, now able to manifest his older dreams and ideas to help him. Well, at least until Lavagirl accidentally destroys it. Lavagirl is furious that Max made her this way in the first place, and can't believe he would curse them to have an existence like this and never rectify her character in any way. It's actually one of my favorite scenes in the movie. I actually find it fascinating.
Why did you make me out of lava? Why, Max?
Why did you make me like that? I have more potential.
Lavagirl was never a completed character, missing an origin, motivation, or an overall purpose, and because Max didn't develop them, she not only has immense emotional baggage, but just straight up managed to ruin their hopes. She pleads with them that she could have been more than a being of fire and lava, and resents them for not giving them that development. They even wonder why you put her and Sharkboy together, since they are such elemental and emotional opposites, like their fundamental existence is just torment. Like, I think this is fascinating. I got surprisingly into her character here. Like, from the perspective of someone who has so many characters, some under or fully developed, a child made a character because it was cool, but never fully developed them as a person. But when finally given life of their own, they're just lost, upset, and empty, wanting a reason for existing their creator couldn't give them.
I'm not evil, am I, Mac? I don't think so. I need to know who I am. Not just destruction or a simple flame. Dream of me as something good.
He never thought that far ahead, and never would, as they hate their own existence since they never rectified their issues and character arcs, and pleads with them that they could have taken a different direction with them, and instead gave them an existence they feel tormented by, and they can only acknowledge that they messed up. Like, I find it so interesting. I could generally see an entire movie based around this conflict. What happens when the creation questions the creator on the legitimacy of their flawed existence, especially after Sharkboy just had his own character arc justified in the book, that his father was alive and looking for him. Lavagirl will never get that character fulfillment, and it kills her inside. Again, I haven't seen something like this in another story. I just genuinely love it, especially someone who already does this stuff.
Lavagirl's identity would give her some serenity. I also really gotta appreciate Dooley's performance. She really put a lot into her character despite how silly it is. However, despite trying to use the crystal, it doesn't work, as only Marissa, or at least the manifestation in Max's mind, can use it, but her father won't let her leave the castle, representing how even Max knows that Marissa's father, overprotectiveness, wouldn't allow them to get closer. That's another thing. Mr. Electrodad has two representations in Max's mind. Mr. Electric, of him intensely trying to cross his imagination and escapism, and the Ice King, who overprotects their daughter. The subconscious mind of a kid is incapable of seeing people as multifaceted individuals, and perceives them only by representing the problematic elements of someone, something that we'll see come to fruition later. And with the villain's plan nearing fruition, they now need to take out Sharkboy and Lavagirl to destroy Max's consciousness, and ultimately, his imagination. Again with the symbolism of not only them being the most important characters in his mind, but they represent the core parts of his psyche and use their emotional weaknesses in what they represent. Sharkboy, as the id, has his rage and instincts manipulated to lure him into a trap with his added weakness of electric eels, courtesy of Linus's intrusive thoughts manipulating Max's mind, and Lavagirl, as the superego, has her emotional sympathy manipulated as she willingly extinguishes herself in the ice water to save him. Max sees his characters dying, ones that have basically become a part of him, and how he can interact on the subconscious world of his imagination, now dead by the representations of those who intentionally and unintentionally want his imagination and escapism to be destroyed. His most cherished characters that represented his imagination, gone. They killed Sharkboy and Lavagirl in the real world, and in his mind. And all he's left with is a dying world that's not even his anymore. But in his most desperate moment, Tobor comes back. As I said before, Tobor is representative of a past hope and dream that Max had that ultimately served the new purpose in his battle over his insecurities. And he has information of the mindscape because he was imagined to be intelligent and helpful and speaks through it. Tobor is representing the subconscious dream world to Max as the conscious individual and asks him what he thinks he should do. And then it literally just flat out spells the escapist metaphor.
I wanted to escape my real world, and the world needed my help to make it a better place.
Okay, I know people constantly call this movie stupid and incoherent for like all of its existence, but did no one notice the entire allegorical part of it? Like, genuinely, they basically just say it multiple times. I can't be the only one who noticed all this stuff, right? But ultimately, Tobor leaves him with his idea, to dream a better dream.
not just for his own selfish escapist fantasy, but for the good of this world and his real one. And this seemingly gives Max a new epiphany. He can't just use this world as escapism, but he does need to fix what he started. And then subconsciously, he seems to be able to. First, Sharkboy is revived and sees his dying partner after risking her life to save them, as then the volcano manifested, giving them an idea on how to revive her. Again, seems coincidental, but in the allegory, Max no longer wants to hide in his imagination forever, wants to fix these aspects of his psyche and creation, which gets more apparent later on. And Max seemingly is already getting more control of his power of creation, now confident in his drive to take control of his life again, finally fulfilling Lavagirl's missing character and fulfillment they were desperate for. And at long last, finally gives our character the weight and importance they were craving for their entire existence.
I know who you are, Lavagirl. You are not fire or a simple flame. You are light.
Max realizes through the epiphany, he doesn't need to just imagine or create for escapism, being the passive observer of his subconscious, only able to see and make stuff in his dreams through his dream journal. He can use his imagination and willpower in tandem. Just as I said before, he's making a better dream himself. As Lavagirl once said before, you need to work to fulfill your desires, and he realizes it. He isn't just pushed by his subconscious wants, but now has the determination and willpower to control it and utilize it properly. A lucid dream where you utilize the omnipotence of imagination and the concentration of willpower. He's not escaping his reality, he's changing it. And his first resolve is to face his mistake with the character that desperately needs it, being the light in the darkness of self-doubt brought by the simple manifestations that created it.
Who turned on the light?
Max needs his dream journal because he can't remember his subconscious fantasies, but he decides he doesn't need it and can just make his own. Again, Max made this world to escape his problems and therefore cannot alter it, but once he's gone past that mindset, he has the determination to change his life and he can change it as well. It's like poetry. And once he empowers the aspects of his subconscious psyche, he directly sets off to fight the manifestations of self-doubt, starting with Minus. Again, Linus ruined his dream journal, as Max interprets him as him actively destroying and perverting his imagination and escapist fantasy, and interprets it as some big supervillain. Another dreamer changing the dream. But he decides he doesn't need it anymore. And it's literally just a battle on someone intending to make their world and when he wants to alter it out of spite. As I said, it's literally an intrusive thought. Then they have a battle, which yeah, is basically a game of Scribblenauts, or I guess Scribblenauts Showdown. But also note another detail. Again, Minus's representation of a supervillain, but also an intrusive thought on an act of bullying. And his creations are actively harmful and destructive, internalized in a child's mindset. But Max's creations are calmer and simpler because he's not out to destroy imagination like Linus. He's a creator wanting to make an ideal world of his imagination. Max is literally fighting his intrusive thoughts, not by destruction, but by creation, and decides to actively make his creation stronger to fight said embodiments trying to undermine his imagination. He's not using it as pure escapism, but he is saying it has internal worth and is refusing for it to die. But an interesting thing happens that Max actually changes perspectives of the interpretation of his bully. He sees that Linus was probably a kid like him with fantastical imagination, but was also forced to grow up past them, probably by reality, and in turn, he can only just take it out on people who haven't. He humanized the bully and wants to help them. Again, what I said before, the destruction of whimsy and naivety by cynicism of growing up and realizing the real world. He doesn't see them as a villain, but as a victim. Like he's using his imagination to face his real problems. He's challenging the shallow manifestation of his fears and hatred of a bully and his actions, not by fighting him, but understanding them. That they have to be more than just a shallow villain trying to destroy them. He's humanizing the intrusive thought. He understands reason and not childish exaggeration. He's growing up.
No. Create a better dream than this. A better world. Don't you see?
He doesn't refer to him as the supervillain alter ego he made up in his subconscious. He's just calling him who he really is.
What do you say, Linus?
That is so poetic. Like this entire movie is a huge allegory on imagination, escapism, and ultimately growing up. He's turned the intrusive thought to sympathy and a desire of actual connection and friendship. And just as he grew up, so did his creations. Again, the manifestations of different parts of their psyche. With Max's efforts, their endeavors are now affirmed. The superego understands their role in the world, and the id is satisfied in their own power to change it. Lavagirl debated how she and Sharkboy can be partners if they are so fundamentally opposite, but they work on so many levels. Their powers complement each other and take account of their weaknesses. Their personalities balance each other out, but it's a determination and connection that makes them a team. They would literally die for the other despite being so fundamentally different. The id and the superego both need to work together to make a functional human being. I really can't help but love them. There's also the subtext, again, of Sharkboy and Lavagirl's purpose. They were his superhero OCs he wanted to believe were real, and literally started the movie making up this huge lie that they're real, and he totally goes on adventures with them. He didn't really see them as characters, but as people he wanted to be real. But that has consequences, because now that he imagined them as real, they were tormented because they weren't finished. They were incomplete and didn't have their story arcs utilized. And then Max grew up and didn't want to escape to his imagination anymore, and took control of it instead, now having the hand of the author, and utilizes his dreams instead of just experiencing it. Finally fulfilling these characters and giving them purpose because he stopped seeing them as real people, but instead of what they are, and finally, they're realized. It's great. Because Max appeased the intrusive thought that was destroying his psyche, both aspects of it can continue to survive and thrive. But it's not the only intrusive thought, as without the main force driving Max to his existential crisis on the worth of his own subconscious, the other one, in Mr. Electric, now takes control, and gives probably the movie's most famous quote.
For every person who dreams up the electric light bulb, there's the one who dreams up the atom bomb.
What's with Robert Rodriguez kids movies and randomly giving really good quotes?
Think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?
But again, think about what I said earlier, how dreams are stand-in for fundamental human desires. Our lives are built upon a web of desire and dreams and the willpower of those who execute it. But with desire, there is choice. Desire of creation, charity, and compassion, and desires of greed, selfishness, and destruction. This whole conflict was caused because of one kid's desire to take out his aggression on another, as Max has had a desire to continue what he loves. And this is coming from a being that represents as a self-destructive mindset. What makes Mr. Electric different than Minus is that he wasn't intentionally made as an effort to hurt Max. It's how a kid interpreted an authority figure, telling him he needs to grow up and give up his imagination and escapism. And his mind internalized it as a threat, creating a villain that sought its destruction. He himself accidentally made the atom bomb. Mr. Electric is entirely internalized as an interpretation made in the worst way possible. And that's what makes it so destructive. The movie says that dreams manifest and become their own powers and entities, and Mr. Electric is one, but in a very negative way. And then seeks to go after Max in the real world to destroy him in his sleep. Max apparently had no idea he was dreaming. Somehow. I really figured he would have realized that, like, all of this is in his head, but to be fair, like, it can be difficult to be aware you're dreaming in a dream, so I'll give it a pass. As everyone else tells him that he can make his dream come true in reality, just as he was able to in his subconscious. His subconscious mind and the entities inside and what they represent are telling him that he can't rely on them to escape the problems in his world, but he needs to take that drive and determination he's learned here to make his world a better place.
The dream real. You can live out your dreams on Earth. Make it real.
Okay, so like this movie is constantly shit on for its incoherent and childish story, but like the movie constantly spells out its message and allegory. The characters are literally doing the closest thing they can to turn to the camera and explaining the message. This entire movie is a massive metaphor and character study about a kid learning to let go of his escapist fantasies and grow up. Why does everyone miss that? Like, genuinely, is Sharkboy and Lavagirl just like secretly some ultimate media literacy test that like everyone failed at? I literally started this video as a joke, as some emo introspection of a dumb kids movie lost in nostalgia, but as I watched it, I was like, wow, there's like a massive relatable allegory here with interesting ideas and deep dives into the nature of childhood and escapism that I never realized before. I'm just kind of baffled here. The characters in his head want to wake up and deal with his problems, as he is worried though if he'll ever see them again. Once again representing that Max is afraid of growing up and losing the love of his escapist world, as internally, it wants him to. I genuinely do feel a sense of closure after all this. And wakes up back in the tornado attacking the school Sharkboy and Lavagirl originally came from. But instead it's actually Mr. Electric, physically. Yeah, so I swear I remembered the movie's ending being different, but they are really blurring the lines of what's real or not. Now there are two possibilities. One, that it turns out this movie is actually just in some sort of goofy Spy Kids ass universe where this shit can happen, justified by this line.
Some dreams are so
Yeah, I know, sometimes you dream of making an over-the-top video on a stupid kids movie for April Fool's Day, and then it spirals through an intense concrete dissection completely out of your control. Or the other one I prefer, that this is still a dream and a subconscious manifestation while Max is asleep before the next day of school. He's still dreaming, but it's shifted back to the real world, and not the one he made up. So only the final scene of this movie is real, and this is still in his head. There's actually some evidence that the reality is altered, such as Max's house being right in front of the school, and the whole Sharkboy and Lavagirl made when first arriving is still in the classroom, despite that adventure being in a dream. Also, that would mean that everything on that day just before Sharkboy and Lavagirl came in was a dream too, which does add up as it's basically Max's internal worst case scenario of the next day of school, of Linus destroying his dream journal. Also, how Linus and Electrodad are much more overtly over the top, hammy, and antagonistic than before.
I know everything, and you know nothing.
It just makes more sense. I see it as Max's subconscious testing his resolve and determination to fix the problems in his real world by mixing the two and giving him the solutions he needs. He needs to first try and do it in his subconscious where the real and imagined issues intersect before he can do it for real. So for all intents and purposes, he's still dreaming the day before class. And he still has unfinished business with his emotions. Hilariously, Mr. Electrodad sees this and can't believe that Max interpreted him as some big cartoon villain.
You dreamt me as a big brown bad guy. I'm not bad.
His parents also come in to save them, and in the state actually acknowledge their love despite the tensions they have, and get sucked into the tornado, but then are saved by Lava Shark and Girl Boy. Again, if you see this through Max's perspective, he knows that his parents actually love each other, and he just needs to help them to see that to save his family. Linus, who in this state was in Max's head, tries to commit to the change in the character Max made him have in Drool, and he actually tries to do a good thing and fight Mr. Electric, but is powerless. It also destroys Max's dream journal, but again, after everything he's went through, he doesn't need it anymore. In fact, he knows what he needs to do. He gets Marissa and gives her the ice crystal, as only she can use it and only she can defeat Mr. Electric, which as a reminder is a representation of her father. Remember, Electrodad isn't just represented in Max's subconscious as a person who tried to destroy his imagination, but also someone overprotective of their daughter they want to have a good relation with. He wants Marissa to stand up for herself and for them to get to know each other more, so he needs to kill two birds with one stone. And despite even his mental interpretation of his teacher not wanting to risk her physically, they both know what they have to do, and then very easily destroy him. Yes, straight up destroy. He is the one dream entity to straight up die. But think of this in the allegory of what's represented. Mr. Electric is a representation of Max's internalized self-loathing of his teacher that his subconscious childish mind manifested as a threat who wanted to destroy his escapism and the dream world. It, aligned with Minus, caused serious destruction of his psyche, even killing it at points, as the self-doubt about his escapist fantasy caused him to lose it. But Max had to grow up. He had to grow past wishing he lived in some magic fantasy world of childishness. If he wants to make his world better, he has to do it himself. And that means maturing enough to look past these threats. He was able to see Linus not as some super villain, but as a person, and because of that, his dreams of Linus were actually helpful and friendly. But Mr. Electric is fundamentally a false internalization. That joke about him being offended that Max interpreted him as some big evil villain is relevant. Max consciously acknowledges that it is stupid and childish to see his teacher like that, and he did grow up. He realized he needs to stop seeing them as huge evil supervillains who want to destroy his life, but as actual people. And this creation of his doesn't need to exist anymore, and he does it through an act of maturity, through his crush of this girl to do so. Another thing of note is that Sharkboy and Lavagirl have never been able to defeat Mr. Electric, as they are defeated or retreated every time despite their powers. Even when Max reaches his full creative potential, they're not able to actually destroy him. Only Max himself, or at least a representation of him facing his issues, can. Because ultimately, with the escapist metaphor, your imagination should not be able to destroy your own insecurities. You need to do it yourself. Now again, imagine this scene in the perspective of what I said earlier, that it's Max's subconscious trying to help him get over his problems in reality. It manifests the changes in his dream worlds, and he uses imagined aspects of his life to reach that ending. Literally everything about it resolved his issues. Seeing Linus as a friend and someone who can help, helping Marissa overcome her own issues, seeing that his parents do love each other, and to see his teacher as who he really is. Like, I think it's all him realizing that and what he needs to do. The movie acted to keep it vague as there's a hard skip to another scene, so it's actually generally up to interpretation if any of this actually happened, which as I said, I don't think it did. Max in the beginning was literally begging to escape the next day at school to go to his made-up world, in which there could be snow and tornadoes to cancel the school day, which both happened after the other, and to me pretty much does so that all this in between these two scenes was literally his dream that gave him a massive internal epiphany he held. So in the next scene, he's already made differences, seemingly bonding more with Marissa, and even seems to have turned Linus to his side, also sketching his own hero. Again, if this was a tie-and skip or the very next day, if they didn't become friends, at least it could be seen that Linus was actually inspired by Max's dream journal and characters to make his own, possibly proving him right, that Linus was just like him, a kid who also dreamed and was told he couldn't and took it out on someone else. And he gave his precious OCs closure. Sharkboy is the king of the ocean and searches for his lost father, guided by the light of his companion, Lavagirl, who has her purpose as queen, as her volcanic powers don't destroy, but create new islands of life. Now, this is a really important thing of note, is that he said that they don't visit him anymore, but he still sees them in his dreams. Max ultimately grew up, and he doesn't need his characters to feel fulfilled. They've received closure as he moved on in his life. Before, they were really his only friends. The movie started with him basically making a self-insertion fanfic with his totally cool characters that are real, his escapism in a world he thought didn't want him. But now he found them. True real friendship, because he put in the effort to take initiative and improve his life, and not just hide in a fantasy. He still has his imagination and escapism and cherishes it, but he doesn't rely on it anymore. He doesn't need them anymore, and he let them go. He doesn't use his imagination to replace his reality anymore. He grew up. He implores everyone to do the same. Don't just dream and hope for a better world. Be the change you want in your own life. Use your passion to make a better world. Don't try and escape your own life. Make it better. And honestly, I love it.
Work to make it real.
Yes.
I think I love this movie. Like, genuinely. Not in an ironic way, not in a so bad it's good way. I mean in a, I found this story incredibly relatable, interesting, and nuanced, and I now have a genuine passion for it, and I actually enjoy my experience with it. Yeah, from Sharkboy and Lavagirl, one of the most infamously bad and inane kids movies, I came out of it as an adult genuinely loving it. But like, you've seen the video. Literally all of it adds up. Like, everything in this movie ties to its message and allegories. It's not a narrative, it's an internal therapy session in the imagination of a child, and how he processes his issues through his imagination. Max, from the start, is a kid without friends, dealing with fears of his parents falling out of love, who finds himself constantly retreating to a world of his imagination, and wants to believe it's real through the scorn of everyone else, who tells him he needs to grow up and stop trying to live in a fantasy world. But still he tries because he hates the situation and can't actually make it better. It's his subconscious that gives him what he wanted, to go on an awesome adventure with his cool OCs to faraway awesome planets. But it's not a paradise because of the numerous intrusive thoughts about his issues. The childish interpretation of resistance to growing up appear as the supervillains he feels they are, and are actively trying to destroy his escapism, sending him on a journey to save it. Then seeing representations of his own life and suppressed emotions, his regrets, passions, fears, avarice, hopes, love, that he is forced to meet face to face and acknowledge, as the world constantly tries to tell him that he needs to actually make the changes in his life to be happy, as the characters he made to be his friends are struggling because Max wants them to be real and they don't have their fictional lives and motivation affirmed as fictional characters he's trying to believe are real. They are the primary ways that Max's subconscious mind speaks through him and the core aspects of his psyche's response to the situation. But he can't rely on escapism, and because of that, he sees his childhood dying, and he denies the escapist fantasy. He can't stay in Neverland, and he's going to take charge of his own life. First deal with his psyche and separate Sharkboy and Lavagirl as fictional characters he needs to finish and treat as such, and then challenging the preconceived notion of his enemies as false and wrong, and finally growing up and accepting who they really are as people. And then his psyche shows him how he can fix the problems in his life if he has the physical willpower and desire to do so, and ultimately ends up having the initiative to make his life like he dreamed of himself, not just to escaping it, but making it real. And at the end, he doesn't need his escapism to be happy with his life, and he's not going to let his dreams pass by. He's going to make them real himself. It's beautiful. I even like how it doesn't end with him just denying his childhood and escapism. He says that Sharkboy and Lavagirl no longer visit him like he made up, but he sees them when he dreams. It's not saying escapism is bad, it's saying that you can't rely on it to escape your life and problems. Don't use it to replace your life or constantly wishing in unfulfilled dreams. Instead, use it to enhance your life. Make your stories, share them, enjoy your passions, and fulfill them, and people will like them. Just don't let it take over your life. Like, okay, joke and meme the hell you want about he ruined my dream journal or dream. But I did not go this long in this video without showing that there is genuine death in this movie when it feels like no one believed it did. Maybe I'm just overanalyzing. Maybe I just looked too deep into this movie and there's nothing. But again, everything I said makes sense in the story, and the story itself pauses multiple times to explain the lesson and would ultimately relate it to the main character's story arc. Maybe this movie was brilliant and we just never gave it a chance to see it that way. Like people only took everything at face value and never cared about how everything worked in the allegory. Like Sharkboy and Lavagirl go through the land of milk and cookies to the kingdom of ice to stop Mr. Electric. Of course that sounds freaking stupid. It's literally a child's subconscious manifestation of their life. You took a symbolic journey literally and you missed the damn point. You don't psychoanalyze a kid's dream by looking objectively at the narrative. You see why they would imagine that. Instead of going, oh, what is this and why are they going here? Instead ask, what would have caused the kid to perceive something into this part of his psyche and what is he doing about it? This is literally a story represented by dreams and imagination. You need to perceive it that way. It's also even worse with all the cheap jokes and shots made at this movie, when the entire point is that it tells you that you need to grow up and grow past these immature notions. And it coming from actual adults who missed the point just makes it sting more. But I guess people just didn't want to give it the chance. They saw the crazy shit in it, didn't think any further. It reminds you of what I said in the beginning, how as adults we now need to have our media as concrete, solid, objective narratives with proper structure, and we would disregard something like this because it didn't fit. But I looked more into it than face value, and I got so much more out of it. Man, this movie has it really bad. The kids were too young and naive to understand the true message and allegory of the story, and adults were too cynical to look past the work at face value. But I think some parts of it stuck with kids like me who saw it. Maybe we didn't realize it, but we felt it and related to it. Maybe that's why so many people my age still remember it. Maybe out of infamy, maybe because it appeals so much to the childhood fantasy, or maybe we understood what it was saying. Like literally in 2020, Rodriguez made another movie, We Can Be Heroes, where Sharkboy and Lavagirl were heavily promoted to reappear in it as a big nostalgia grab, and people were disappointed that had literally nothing to do with the original, and they were basically just background characters. Also, they somehow had a disappointingly normal kid, but like, she's made out of living magma, huh? Okay, I don't know how you put his pectoral fin into a volcanic caldera, but I'm just gonna assume the Leidenfrost effect was utilized. But yeah, it does say something that people who grew up on it were disappointed that Sharkboy and Lavagirl weren't given the proper respect and utilization they deserve, which does show this movie left an impact and people still had emotional connection. Even they knew it deserved more respect and appreciation. You know, I like to think the whole story of that movie was made by Max. Just like the ending of the movie, he left them as their own fictional characters, but he never forgot them. He grew up and kept making their stories and eventually publishes a huge superhero universe of his own creation and shares this to so many others like he used to as a kid. I think that's really great closure. But I think one of the biggest reasons why I ended up loving this movie when rewatching it after decades is I realized I relate to it. I was that kid. I had trouble socializing. I made up stories and characters and real worlds in my imagination. It really was my childhood escape from my life, and looking back, I cherish it. But I had to grow up. I grew past that escapism and become a functional adult, but still I never really forgot about it. I still kept creating. I still made new characters and worlds and stories because I loved it. It was my passion. I enjoy it. I hope I can publish some and is my escape at times when life or school can get too stressful. Just something I can make of my own that makes me happy. Maybe one of the reasons I end up loving this movie is I've basically already lived through it. In its own way, I find it made one of the most weirdly relatable movies I've ever seen. And I just know so many other people do. Those who had childhood escapism, those who have insecurities on the worth of their imagined and created worlds, those who still love adults, love making fictional worlds and characters. I think there is a core of this movie that so many people relate to. And I really hope, after everything I said here, that you can too. If you've watched this far, I really hope you understand where I'm coming from. All the thematic relevance and brilliance of this seemingly stupid, silly movie, and how much of it truly encompasses a forgotten aspect of childhood, and a beautiful metaphor of finally growing up. Like it came from the most unexpected place possible, but it did. Maybe it's not real, maybe it's just me, but I think everything just added up too much. I legitimately implore you all to give it a rewatch, especially if you did watch it before as a kid, especially if you have the same childhood experience I did, and especially if you think what I said is too much to actually be true, because I genuinely think this movie deserves a second chance, like a genuine one, and maybe you'll end up appreciating it more than you used to. It's really funny because originally I was gonna be over the top and make some proper April Fool's video looking at this movie too closely and not taking it seriously, but somehow I ended up actually loving it and wanting to give it the proper credit and respect I don't think it's ever gotten before. It reminds me why I made this channel, to bring appreciation to stuff I genuinely think deserves it, especially with Ruby Gillen being thrashed so much, but I found it so meaningful and relatable, and made my channel just to defend it. And I wanted to keep that spirit with everything I did after. Maybe I actually need to grow up too. So just remember, dream a better dream and make sure you make them come true yourself. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.
Have you ever had a dream that you want him to do you so much you could do anything?